Welcome back, DigiDs, to another episode of, that's right, Kerbal Space Program 2. I know, it's been a hot minute since we've actually came back and watched a little bit and done a little bit of Kerbal Space Program 2, because DigiDs, oi, I have mentioned it in a couple times in the past videos. I think actually only one video I may have mentioned it, or I'll get onto a little bit of detail, but I've been having quite an issue with this, where for some reason, after we did the most recent, the last video we did on it, anything past that point, I was no longer able to launch anything. I could do just like a command pod, it wouldn't launch. I could do just a command pod with like, a rocket wouldn't launch. I could do just like a wing, it wouldn't launch. It like nothing would launch. I tried reinstalling the game. I checked the integrity. I did all the setting changes and nothing for some reason worked. So I had to wait until the new update came out. And at that point, when the new update came out, it actually finally works now. So we can actually start doing some more Kerbal Space Program 2 content, which is fantastic because I've missed playing this game. I've had a lot of different ideas, different kind of, different aspects that we can really go do, different planets we want to visit and whatnot. But the game has most recently, like I said, it did have an update. It had a big update. It's one of its bigger, most primary updates. Now, kind of how they're doing the structure of their updates at the moment is they are kind of doing them in big segments instead of doing a system where, they release an update and you swear like every couple of days or every few days, oh, this small fix, this small fix, this small fix, and every small fix kind of somehow always ends up making another small problem. So now they just kind of, they consolidate it all into like one big update. So that way at the end of the update, they can all do it at one point, see what breaks, hopefully nothing breaks. They can kind of all quality control test it together, as one unit, how it all works together with one another as different parts of code, because sometimes when they release those small patches, time and time again with those small patches, you don't know how later patches and other later code is going to interact with the earlier code. But if you kind of all do it together as one big like project, then it has, a little bit more integrity, or wow, it has better, what's the word I'm looking for? Like you can integrate it into itself better, right? So it talks to itself better within its own code source, which is good. But yeah, there have been a lot of updates that have come out, and I'm actually kind of read over some of the primary updates that some of you may be interested in. But just to list off a few, they like optimize some of like the fuel flow calculations for kind of the 3 times speed, and reduce like some of the the processing power for kind of the time warp. So I know that was a very terrible way of explaining it, but so basically what they've done is that they kind of optimize how quickly the fuel is going through the engine. Somehow it is miscalculating some of the fuel rate, so sometimes you end up with these fuel tanks that end up having like a 0.019 left in it, but like 0 like oxidizer, like the other way around. Maybe it's because it's miscalculating, and that might still kind of happen a little bit, but it should be better. Sometimes it didn't always represent like how much delta V you would get out of it, so you got the wrong amount, so you kind of like miscalculated your trajectory, which always didn't exactly help. But you can kind of manage your way around it, but it's good that they fixed something like that. They improved the joint strength for engine plate. Now, the engine plates was actually, it turns out they had 0. I guess when a little bit of the tweaking, when they were going to go look at the engine plate, like test out strength of like the joint strength of the piece, it was at 0, so it basically had nothing. It made anything that's attached to it basically just flopping all over. It may as well just been a second ship that was just pushing it from below, right? So it gave no structure to it. So they go ahead and updated that, which is pretty good. They fixed the Rapier engine mode changing issues, which I'm not really familiar with what that was, but I did use the Rapier engine a couple times, and I never noticed anything in particular, but it seemed to work pretty well. But let's take a moment and look at the rocket that I'm actually building here in the background. So we are going over to Duna, which I don't think I've even mentioned what our project is today. That's right, DigiDs. I'm getting carried away. We are going to Duna. I'm talking about everything else that's going on about Kerbal Space Program, but I'm not talking about what we're doing in Kerbal Space Program. We are going to Duna. Now, hopefully the title will give it away. The title will be like To Duna or something like that. I might make it a little bit more creative, but we'll see. I might get lazy, but hopefully not. I'm kind of on the grind today, making a whole bunch of videos, but let's not get carried away. So yeah, we're going to Duna. I got a few stages here. I think it's always kind of important to have multiple stages. You have your primary like bottom stage, then you have like your mid stage, because your bottom primary stage is what gets you most of the way out of the atmosphere. And then typically that stage doesn't even get you all the way into orbit. A lot of the time, that only gets you part way into orbit or into a suborbital trajectory. So you're kind of like going up, like let's say, I don't know, 180,000 kilometers, 200,000 kilometers, just to get like a good distance out there, lobbing yourself up. And then you're kind of just, you get all the way up your apoapsis system, then you can kind of tilt over to your horizon and just boost and get your trajectory out that way to raise your orbit. But you typically have to do that with your mid stage, because the main stage, getting through the atmosphere, is the hardest part about rocketry. Flying through space in itself is easy. It's just a vacuum. You just kind of float. As long as you make everything protected from the cold and heat and whatnot, which, you know, it is complicated in itself, but that's kind of easy. But to get through the atmosphere, that's the hard part. You have to actually design a rocket that's strong enough. You have to design a rocket that has enough aerodynamics, a rocket that can withstand the heat, you know, as well as think about a way of trying to get, I guess the hard part is also trying to get it back home, right? Because if you want these experiments to come back home, if you are like astronauts, or if you got, you know, samples that you want to come back to Earth or back to Kerbin, you have to think about the atmosphere again when you're re-entering because of like the reheating. Now, luckily in Kerbal Space Program 2, we don't have re-entry heating just yet. So we're a little lucky on that front. But the rocket is starting to look pretty good. We have good two central like solid rocket motor boosters on the left and right. We have our central actual bid piece rocket, which is really good on the vacuum. So hopefully these two central solid rockets will get us most of the way through the atmosphere and lob us up, so that way our fuel can carry us halfway through that through that fuel tank. Halfway through, we'll probably be within the vacuum above that 70,000 meter mark and get even more thrust value out of it. Try to get a little bit more of the TWR, because right now when you're launching off of like the base platform with your full fuel tanks, with a full type of, you know, you're at sea level, you're at full atmospheric pressure, you're only getting a TWR, you know, a thrust to weight ratio of about like, let's say 1.6 to 1.7. You know, you're basically pushing your own weight and then maybe about 50 to 70% more. It depends on kind of how heavy you are, but in this case we're probably pushing about a 1.7. It slowly pushes you up, but as you, of course, as you go through your fuel tanks, as your engines throttle all the way up, of course, even though if you put your throttle at 100%, your engine still have to throttle up a little bit. It takes a couple of seconds, so it goes, you know, it just kind of ramps up to it. So that's really important. But so as you kind of lose your weight ratio from all the fuel being burned, you still have that same amount of thrust. You're going faster and faster. Your TWR goes faster. But as soon as you're in a vacuum, your weight doesn't necessarily really matter that much. You know, you still have to push it, but you're not being dragged down. You're not trying to get through the atmosphere. You're not being dragged back down by the gravity as much. You're not going through anything that's slowing you down. So that's what's particularly important about trying to get through here. So we're actually taking a look at trying to get over to Duna. We're kind of zooming around, getting our orbit set, but we're trying to get ourselves also right and set up it perfectly in a trajectory, as we'll take a look here later, as a little bit of where we set up our trajectory with the orbit of where we actually want Mars, or, you know, Duna, to be set up. But launching off, this rocket surprisingly goes very smoothly. It shoots straight as an arrow. I mean, I had no particular issues with it at the start. You know, it went pretty straight. I know they did send the update. They, you know, like they said, they did increase some of the joint strength designs. I think with mid-size level rockets, you've got some really good like mid-joint strength. Like, I think things have been a lot stronger. Like with the rocket like this, you don't get a whole lot of bending issues, but once you get started and get it bigger, you get a lot of issues. Anything that like kind of breaks the mold as well, with like keeping to the form of the rocket. If you get anything that has like a narrow piece, it'll start flexing a lot. But going back to the updates as well, so they said they also fixed an environmental issue where some of the objects would spawn on top of an active vessel. So I think maybe that even happened in our first video, where as we were flying around in one of our planes, the green texture of the trees and grass down below went on top of our plane, so it looked like we were like perfectly camouflaged. Like, that is an absolute stealth bomber at that point. So unfortunately they did fix that. I thought it was kind of cool. I thought it'd be kind of quirky, just leave that on, but I get it. They've got to get rid of it. It is a little bit, it is a decently, you know, noticeable bug, so that's fair on them. But let's take a look at here at what else they have. Fix the engine thrust for being deflected at too high of a value when a part obstructs an engine exhaust, the Kraken drive bug. Yeah, so there were a couple of Kraken drives. If you're unfamiliar with what Kraken is basically the jankiness and or you know, the vibrating parts of, you know, just the game being a little bit broken with this code. KSP's always had a degree of that. So there were some like kind of exploits that you could use with some of these engines and the exhaust that would actually allow you to have almost infinite thrust for like almost no fuel spent or no fuel spent. So, but I didn't really get on top of that. It just kind of gets rid of, you know, the value of the game, but it's kind of funny. They already give you a mode for, infinite fuel, right? But I guess it's just kind of funny to see what you can do with the game, see how broken it is, you know? It just, messing with bugs can always be fun, and that's what KSP's always been kind of, I guess not necessarily known for being buggy, but they know that if you play the game, it does have bugs. But typically, at least with KSP1, it's been refined so much to the point that any bugs it does have are kind of just like things that we have purposely left in, just because people use those bugs almost to their advantage sometimes. But we're going to be increasing our orbit here, but taking a look at where our trajectory is, this is kind of a image of where we want our trajectory to be looking at. We have blue for Kerbin and red for Duna, and that's exactly where we are positioned at this moment to be setting up a good transition window of where our orbits can meet. If I extend out my orbit from Kerbin, going all the way out to Duna's from this position at this quarter field, almost kind of behind it, chasing it, you end up, because as you're going out, you're slowing down, right? But the plane is ahead of us, but we are on the inner ring. We are going faster. Eventually, Kerbin, or Earth, will get past Duna. But because we're going faster, we are going to end up passing Duna. But we don't slow down into the same rate as Duna until the top of our apoapsis of our orbit, right? I know a lot of big words. Basically saying you go slower when you go faster the closer you are to the sun, and you go slower the further away you are from the sun. So we're gonna go ahead, we're gonna get ahead of Mars, and then we're gonna slow down and then crash into it again when it gets ahead of us. And that's kind of like the game plan. So if you go out a little bit further than the orbit, you can kind of slow down further, let the planet come up beside you and almost chase you, and you can run into each other at the same time. That's the intersection that we're really trying to set up here in this interaction. Now, this is a pretty decent rocket. It should get us all the way here. The main objective really is to try to get the Kerbins back in this mission, but I think halfway through, even getting to this point, I started to realize, I'm like, I don't think I'm gonna be able to get these Kerbins back. The unfortunate part of it is, DigiDs, that I don't think we're gonna be able to get these Kerbins back at all. I thought I was gonna have a lot more fuel, but I'm already getting a good part of the way through my fuel now, and we still only have one stage left after this, right? So this stage is probably gonna get us all the way into our transition window and probably into the sphere influence, or at least the gravity well of Duna, right? But I imagine we're probably gonna run out of fuel as soon as we start to kind of get into that zone. We're not going to have enough, but we'll see how long it lasts us. Then we'll be on to our last stage to really depend on it to get us back onto, or really let us land on the surface. Now, you may have, some of you with the keen eye may have noticed that in the building, in the background, I did put parachutes on this vessel. So going into Duna, it does have a little bit of an atmosphere. You know, Mars or, you know, Duna, it does have a little bit of an atmosphere. So we can use some parachutes and even select some effects to kind of really just drag us down as we come down to the surface. And as we're coming into sphere influence here, we do have about half of this stage left, which is really important. It's going to slow us down for a majority of the part as we get out of our time warp and just kind of open throttle here at our, which is technically our periapsis, because we don't have a highest point right now. This is our lowest point. Until we can form an actual orbit around the planet, then we'll be at the apoapsis, unless it'll flip around for half a second while the engine is going through. It'll go crazy for half a second, you'll see, but you'll see it flip around just barely enough. Yeah, there we go. So now I'm at the apoapsis. Periapsis is coming down into just above the atmosphere of Duna, almost hitting the moon there as it was trying to whip us around with a gravity assist. That is a really good way to gravity assist your way out of this system. Is not even necessarily out of Duna, but if you can get Ike, I believe is this moon, lined up along with Duna, you can whip yourself around twice. Whip around Ike, get another gravity assist around Duna, double your speed, and you can almost be doubling your orbital like trajectory in this solar system out into the, you know, further expanses. If you wanted to go visit like Saturn or, you know, or like Neptune, all those further gas giants and such. But we are coming up to Duna here. They have done an amazing job of really give it a high-res, high-altitude look to these planets. I know down on the surface, it still looks a little bit flat and kind of not a lot of detail, but hey, what can you do when you're trying to generate a literal entire planet here? I mean, sure, you got some higher-end games like Elite Dangerous or like No Man's Sky or Star Citizen, but you know, those are also multi-$100 million type of companies, type of situations. I don't think these guys are that big of a industry, but you know, they're kind of a smaller indie company, but a lot of people know them at this point just because of KSP. I think they did change hands. I forget who is in charge of it now. Honestly, I should know this information. I am a terrible YouTuber. I'm so sorry. But, you know, it's easily a one Google search away. But doing that in the middle of a recording would... I do not want this to accidentally mess up the recording. I've had that happen before. Like, I don't know if any of you perhaps maybe watched the editing stream that we had, I think at this point about a week ago. I was learning Sony Vegas for the very first time, but on stream. And while I was learning it on stream, and near the very end, I did post a whole video, but near the very end, which is, oh, by the way, that's very beautiful. The moon is coming over. Oh, but that's very beautiful. But near the very end, I open up the browser, and for some reason, when I open up the browser, it crashed the stream. But luckily, I was signing off like 2 or like 5 minutes later after that. So not a whole lot of content was missed there at the end. It was just cut a little bit short, sadly. I just didn't bother getting on just to sign off, you know? But, so I don't want to risk doing that right now, but yeah, you can always just kind of give that a Google. I'm sure, I want to say it's like Paradox something, but I know, again, it's changed hands. But we are coming into the atmosphere of Duna here, which is just beautiful. We're going to want to activate the parachutes and the engines just kind of right before the end. We're going to do a little bit of a suicide burn. I mean, I think we could slow down and waste a lot more fuel if we were to do it very casually. But the problem is that you waste a lot more with that. You can save fuel if you do a suicide burn. And for those of you who are not particularly, you know, familiar with what that is, it's basically firing your throttle at the very last moment possible to the point that you are touching ground at the point that you would have just barely been able to, right? So it is just trying to use as less fuel as possible, but I did not reach that objective. I did not reach that objective at all. I fired way too late. I thought I was coming in. I underestimated how much the parachutes were going to affect me. I thought they were going to drag a lot more. They did not. They do a lot less than anticipated. And I'm going to even activate them early now. And if I go into their settings, I can activate them even earlier by increasing their deploy altitude. They are probably reducing my speed by like 10 meters per second. They're not doing a lot. The atmosphere is very thin on this planet. But yeah, so do a little bit of a better burn here. Not too much of a suicide burn because I'm taking this a little more casually. But, you know, I do want to actually laying it down. Again, the parachutes are not doing a lot. If I don't have my engine on, I will increase the speed, probably to about 20 meters per second as well. Kind of a bounce, but we made it, Digidees. We have landed on Duna. We have actually made it, and the first one who's going to take their steps is Valentine. And actually, real quick, I have to go jump back inside, make sure that we have our solar panels extended to keep our energy here. But yeah, Valentine is going to be the first Kerbal to touch foot down on Mars. The first Kerbal to take the oath to put a flag down here on the planet. And we will name it First Kerbal to Touch. First touch of Duna. Starts doing a little jiggy dance in the background. Yeah, you get it. First Kerbal to touch Mars. I mean, Duna space. Thank you, Digidees, for the support. Some reason I did run into a little bit of issue. It wouldn't let me type all the way through. I think you might have a limited number of characters, which I guess makes sense. But yeah, subscribe. Like, if you're liking the content so far, make sure to subscribe. You know, hit that big old juicy red square down there in the bottom right. You know, you can subscribe anytime to come back for more content just like this. I will be making more KSP content. I do have other videos already lined up to be editing ahead of time. Next one, actually, I think we're going to be trying to touch down on the sun. And Digidees, let me tell you, that was a real doozy to to record. So you're going to be in for a lot of designing next episode. But yeah, I look forward to that. We have also been picking up on a Bad North series, but however, that probably only has maybe another 5-ish episodes left in it. because we are going to end up completing that probably within that time frame, maybe even sooner. But trying to take down the flag again, I got stuck. After placing down the flag, it wouldn't let me move at all. Like, nothing I could do really let me through. But yeah, first goal was to touch Duna, 3/21/2023. For that is when I'm recording this. Subscribe, and thank you for the support. I have been loving all of the comments. You know, hey, and I don't know if I can necessarily call it a bad comment, a hate comment, or whatever type of comment, but it wasn't necessarily a good one, it wasn't a bad one, but someone just said, you know, hey, you lost me at the beginning, or you lost me at that intro or something like that because of that first Bad North episode. And let me tell you, that is 100% fair because because that intro was atrocious. So hey, I finally got my first constructive criticism of like, yo, bro, that intro is bad. At least that's how I took it. Anyway, at least that's how I already felt about it. And there was no way, I mean, I could have redone that intro and then just like sliced it in, but that felt a little bit non-authentic. You know, I like to keep a little bit of authenticity to my videos if I can. You know, who knows, maybe give it a couple years of releasing videos every day, I'll lose a little bit of that of just like, well, I don't know, just record something, put it out there and be done. You know, I hope not. You know, I have been loving this, and I've been loving the whole passion of really making these videos and releasing these and seeing you guys react to them and watching just how just this whole career really, like this whole situation even works, how people have been doing this whole time. Really gives you a new perspective on what people have been doing and what you need to do to really make it. And I know I can't even talk like I really know anything, as if I actually do, but I don't. But yeah, so DigiDs, this is when I definitely knew I was not going to be able to get these Kerbals back at all. I am trying to get them at least into orbit, so at least, because if they sat down there on the surface, they'll cook alive, they have no real oxygen, they'll be all dusty, it'll be dreary. Sure, they might have a planet, but honestly, I think Valentine and Jebediah would have wanted this. They requested it. You know, they left me letters saying that they'd rather die in orbit. I mean, they're not gonna die. No, we'll definitely rescue them eventually, maybe. I mean, I had to restart the campaign already because when the new update came out, the last one didn't work. So, you know, they'll probably end up getting deleted before I ever rescue them. I'm sorry, Valentine and Jebediah, but yeah, I'm gonna put them into a graveyard orbit and just kind of let them sit above this beautiful Mars landscape orbiting around, so they can just admire its beauty for all that time is to come, sitting out here in the vast beauty that is our solar system. And I could gawk for hours and talk for days about the idea of even all those individual stars and dots there in the background that we take for granted, that we don't notice. All those individual dots, they're all solar systems, they're all stars, they all have planets, you know, and who knows, one of those might have life one of these days, and or at least life that we could find. You know, there could be a lot more life that we even know about that we just can't detect. Maybe there's a lot more microbial life than we know about, but in terms of intelligent life, probably not anywhere close. Maybe like, what, like Alpha Centauri or something like that, that's way out there. But yeah, we are sitting here floating out because Valentine got to go touch the actual ground of Duna. I let Jebediah here kind of float around outside in the orbit of Mars, and he is just loving it. He is absolutely just jaw-dropping, astounded at how beautiful this is. It is a real treat for him to be out here. It's a real treat for me to be out here recording this and just watching, even just watching this recording back, you know, doing a voiceover, this kind of style. I love doing new styles. I love doing type of different, you know, I don't know, just something different. It's refreshing. But, you know, we're about done here, but thank you, DigiDs, for watching this video. It's been a great time, and I'm still bad at outros, so I will see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.